In this video, I want to introduce you to an approach to building mental resilience for long distance or multi-day rides. Before I start though, I'm going to say I'm not a qualified coach. My experience is not of some sort of high performance nature. I'm a work in progress. I'm continually having to work at this. When I say mental resilience, what do I mean by that? I mean simply being able to cope better when things get tough. So for those of you with a short attention span who want me to get to the point so you can decide whether you're going to watch the rest of this video, my approach is as follows. You should treat mental resilience like a savings account and not like a credit card. Still with me? Let's go for a ride and I'll tell you all about it. In 2018, I was doing the first of my long rides home. This one was from Milan to London, 1,600 kilometers over 14 days. And I was 10 days in, and I was in a little tiny hamlet in the Belgian countryside called Marche-en-Femme. And this day, on the 11th day, I was going to be riding to Brussels, about 125 kilometers. The first 75 kilometers that day was tough, really tough. Lots of uphill and downhill, missed turns and wrong roads, cobbles, endless cobbles. In Belgium, I don't know what the fascination is with cobbles. At 75k, I had reached a point whereby I should have been turning north and following a lovely cycle path along a canal for about 25k, stop and have some lunch, and then press on for the final 25. When I got to the cycle path, I discovered it too was cobbled the entire way. Anyway, I pulled off the cycle path for a rest. I was feeling tired. That first 75k had taken me almost 4 hours. And I checked Google Maps just to make sure I was on the right route. Google Maps told me I still had 85k to go instead of 50. I had what you could describe as a full-on meltdown at the side of the path. I took my helmet off, threw it on the floor. I stamped my feet. I called my wife and told her how unfair it was that the sneaky Belgians had moved their capital 35 kilometers further north than I expected it to be. And I lay back on the ground thinking, I'm tired. I'd already been on the bike for 4 hours. What I faced was another 5 hours of riding to get to Brussels. And then it gradually dawned on me. The only way I was going to get to Brussels was for me to ride there. There was no shortcut I could take. There was no call I could make for someone to come and pick me up. There wasn't even a train I could get on. I was going to have to get back on my bike and ride. It was also 32 degrees centigrade. Unlike where I am today, in the cold of the Warwickshire countryside, it was absolutely boiling and I was melting. The next 5 hours were a total nightmare. It got hotter and hotter. I ran out of food. I ran out of water. I broke a cleat and had to find a bike shop that was well off the road, which added more kilometers onto the road I was already doing. At one point, I was so desperate for a drink, I ended up knocking on the door of a small Belgian farmhouse to ask them if they would give me some water in terrible, terrible French. 20 kilometers on, I'd run out of all of that water and I chased a hot dog vendor around a town square we were setting up for the evening, begging him to sell me some food in also terrible French, which he refused to do, and he sold me 2 cans of Coke for 10 euros, one of which I drank in one gulp on the spot, which he thought was hilarious. Eventually I came to a crossroads. My options were to go straight on, following the route that the Garmin was telling me to use, or to turn left, which said it was only 15 kilometers left into Brussels. I chose left. It was a motorway. I did 10 kilometers in the drainage ditch on the other side of the Armco, all the way into the outskirts of Brussels, which was pretty terrifying and probably very illegal. Once I got to the outskirts of Brussels, I found a drive-through McDonald's, the first place I'd seen open for 4 hours. I ate 2 full meals, and that just about got me the final 5k into Brussels city centre, where I'd completed 159k for the day and been on the bike for 9 hours. I was absolutely knackered. What's the point of telling you the story? other than to amuse you at my own stupidity and not being able to plan properly. On that day, I had to draw on every bit of mental resilience to finish that ride. Mental resilience is often all you have left when your body says no, when you've run out of physical capability. It's your mind that has to take over, and that's the thing that we need to work on. You have to work on physical fitness, so why wouldn't you have to work on mental fitness? And unfortunately, there are no shortcuts. You also need it when you're bored, frustrated, lonely, frightened. All of those things are emotions I've experienced on long distance rides and on multi-day rides. And that's when you need that mental resilience. My main point is this: on the days when it gets toughest, you need a savings account of mental resilience that you can draw down upon, because there's no such thing as a credit card where you can spend now and pay later. So how do you start building your savings account? Same way as you would with a normal bank, by making little deposits. You need a bank of memories that you can draw upon that will tell you that the last time you faced something like this, you found a way to cope with it. Conversely, what you don't want is the thought in your mind, the last time this got hard, I gave in. I called somebody to pick me up. I cut the ride short. I didn't even get out and start the ride. I would argue that you need to experience tough times in your training in order to have that bank that you can draw upon when you're actually doing the event that you want to do. Great news is that you can start your savings account of mental resilience by making small deposits. So when you're out on a ride, you're coming to the end of the ride and you're tired, add on an extra few kilometers. Doesn't have to be many, but add them on. If you're lucky enough to have club mates to ride with, tag on a bit before you meet them, or tag on a bit at the end. If you need to get up early to get your training in, get up. Don't hit the snooze button. When the weather's rubbish or you're standing at your back door in the garage thinking, I don't want to go out in this, go out. Don't cut the ride short. When the weather gets bad, finish it. When you're doing these things, say it out loud to yourself, the reason why you're adding the extra kilometers on, or you're riding in the rain, or you're getting up early, is because you want to make a deposit in your savings account of mental resilience. Say it out loud, celebrate it. Although obviously not too loud, you don't want people to think you're a nutter riding on your own. Making those small deposits over and over again will help you build up your resilience. It will help you feel like you can cope with adversity. But I already know you're saying to yourself, this is all well and good, but I want to make bigger deposits. So how do you do that? My favourite way of doing it was with an A to B ride. A to B rides are great because they take away your options to quit. They change the nature of the ride. So if you can, when we can, ride to a friend's house or to a family member's house that's just slightly too far away, or far enough away that you couldn't simply turn around and come back the same day. Stay overnight and then ride back. Or stick your bike on a train first thing in the morning and take it far enough away that it'll give you a long ride home that'll really challenge and test you, where you know the only way to make it back is for you to ride back. So what are the things that you can do to cope when it gets tough? We've already talked about one of them. Positive self-talk, just saying to yourself out loud, this is why you're doing something, you can do it, just tell yourself to do it. For me, positive self-talk has always had a bit of a limitation. What I've always preferred is distraction. To distract myself, I sing. Normally 1980s tunes or big band tunes, you know, like we don't know each other well enough for me to start singing to you yet. I do know for a fact though, there's at least one Italian family whose trip to the Alps in 2018 was ruined by a medley of Depeche Mode hits ringing off the mountainside. The third thing you can do is just to think about people who inspire you. That could be famous athletes, famous cyclists, or it could just be friends and family. Think about how they will react when you tell them you've finished. Think about how proud they'll be of you when you do it. Now the last one I'm going to tell you about is going to sound funny to some of you, and it even sounds funny saying it out loud. But I imagine I'm in a documentary, and I think about what the commentator would say, or the narrator would say, over the tops of the images of me struggling up a mountainside or something like that. And I think about them saying, look how well Paul coped with that. Oh, it's gone properly cold now, so I've probably forgotten half the things I was going to say. So, treat mental resilience like a savings account. Make little deposits as often as you can, and as you can, make the bigger ones using A to B rides. That's another ride done, and more credits in the bank in my savings account of mental resilience, because it was pretty cold out there. If you're anything like me, you've probably spent ages looking on YouTube or reading books trying to find ideas, inspiration, techniques for the ways to deal with all the other challenges of long distance or multi-day rides. And I mentioned some of those at the start of the video. Things like being lonely, being bored, being scared. It only occurred to me about 6 months ago, although I've got a bookshelf full of books on cycling, all of them were written by men or about men. And it wasn't until 6 months ago that I started reading books by female athletes. And I'd like to recommend one to you. It's a book called Where There's a Will by Emily Chappell, who's a previous winner of the Transcontinental Race. And it really deals with the challenges that she's met psychologically and mentally, both in her training and during the races. I'm going to finish with a quote from that book, which really stuck with me. But before I do, write in the comments what's worked for you. How have you coped? Because as I said right at the start of this video, I'm still a work in progress. So tell me what works for you so that I can try that. I resolved that I would keep on riding whenever I could. If I was tired, or if the pain in my already sore feet got worse, I'd slow down, but I'd keep riding. I'd remind myself that those hours when the strength blazed in my legs would balance out the long afternoons when I despair of myself and crawled along just above walking pace. If I felt weak, I'd ride weakly, but I'd still ride. Anticipating the moments of panic I knew that I'd experience later on the ride when I convinced myself that I was a failure and didn't even deserve to be there. I told myself that as long as I was riding my bike, however slowly I was doing it, I was on my way to finishing the Transcontinental, no matter how long that might take.